ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume 3. This time the cover features Beatrice and Puck, who also appeared on Volume 1's cover, so it is now clear who is the true protagonist that's drawing all the volume sales. It's Puck. This is the end of Arc 2, the Tumultuous Week, and unlike the previous volume that was mostly dialogue with some action sprinkled in, this one is mostly fighting, struggling, and Subaru getting hurt. Let's get right into it. As usual, I'll divide the review into sections and then give my overall thoughts at the end. Our boy Subaru goes through a tough time in this one. He is determined to make sure no one dies in this loop, so he starts off by being as friendly and as helpful as possible so that he doesn't trigger the suspicions of the twins and they don't kill him. At the same time, he has to be alert and find out who the shaman is and prevent him from killing anybody. Needless to say, this is too much of a mental toll for Subaru. Our main character is many things, but a master manipulator is definitely not one of them. He usually gets along with people by just being himself, a very honest, sometimes even inconvenient guy that can't read the room and that has lame jokes, but a good heart. Here, he's just trying way too hard. Rum quickly notices this and describes him as being so optimistic it's nauseating in typical Ram fashion. The facade is so obvious though that even Emilia notices it. Besides his approach not working, it's also not sustainable, as he starts cracking very early on, going so far as to feel sick on every social interaction because he's not as funny or as smooth as he would like to be. This reaches a point where he even physically vomits from all the piled up stress. As I've said before, Subaru can be quite relatable even if the situations themselves are quite extreme and unrealistic. I'm sure most people watching this video have had times in their lives where they tried way too hard to fit in. You quickly realize that maintaining a performance is not only not sustainable, but it's also not a healthy way to build relationships. Obviously, for Subaru this isn't quite just as simple as being a people pleaser. There's literally life and death at stake for him. Still, I find it very interesting how through these exaggerated plot points, the author can make relatable moments for us to connect more with Subaru. This volume is where Subaru realizes that he's afflicted by the troublesome illness known as love. He's at his lowest point, feeling completely stressed out from putting on a front all day and feeling very alone. After all, he can't tell anyone about Return by Death, and then Emilia gives him a lap pillow. She doesn't really understand his circumstances, but gives him her unconditional support in a cute, clumsy way that she thinks is the best she can offer. He cries, he complains, but Emilia is just there, supporting him. It's from this point on that on Subaru's mind and on the reader's mind, there's no doubt anymore that he loves Emilia. This whole scene is very important for the story going forward, and while it's cute, it has a lot of emotion, and it's a good memory for Subaru to fall back on. I have to say though, the more pragmatic side of me can't help but think that a lap pillow is incredibly uncomfortable for both people. Their interaction afterwards is also very educational, with Emilia telling Subaru that a single thank you is better than a dozen apologies, and I very much agree with that. Later in an interaction, Subaru is about to apologize but corrects himself and says thank you instead. For Subaru, Emilia isn't just a love interest, she's also a source of inspiration. He thinks about her and how she wouldn't hesitate when saving the child in the forest. This becomes a theme in ReZero, where these two become some sort of mutual inspiration for each other. Subaru is very brave in this volume, still I love that he has many unheroic moments, as is typical of our main character. During the fight with Rem and the demon beast, Subaru escapes by crawling in what the narrator describes as looking like a cockroach. Like an idiot, he hesitates and misses the first strike on Ram's horn and was only saved by his dumb luck. At a point during his struggles, he also says, "It hurts, Mummy, Daddy, Emiliata," which is endearing in a weird way, but also very pathetic and not behavior that you would expect from a hero. Pathetic moments aside, Volume 3 is a very good one for Subaru and one where he highlights his best qualities. Speaking of highlight, Ram goes hard in this one, and the descriptions of carnage during her rampage are just awesome. Her character goes through a big change in Volume 3. She goes from torturing Subaru and killing him to risking her life to save him. It's obvious now that she was never evil, she was just doing what she thought was best. Despite her actions changing greatly, her character remains consistent, she is still very impulsive. In fact, when Subaru uses Shamak near Emilia for the first time, Ram was the one who had to calm her down, which is a neat detail I completely forgot. Even in the good loop, Ram could have still killed Subaru, which is very interesting, and it's not explicitly stated, but I like to believe that Ram went with Ram and Subaru to the village to prevent any rash actions from Ram. Because of all the distrust and animosity, it's very satisfying when they finally team up. Quoting from the book, Subaru felt like it was the first time they had truly stood side by side. We get Rem and Rum's backstory, and we also get a few pages of Rem's perspective of Subaru arriving at the mansion and then finding him sleeping on Emilia's lap. The story up until this point is very main character centric, with the omniscient narrator sometimes adding little bits of information, so it's very interesting to finally see the story from another character's perspective. Her backstory gives a lot of justification for her impulsivity, both in her deep hatred for the witch cult and in her deep desire to save Subaru in this loop. Not only does Subaru remind her of herself with all his inadequacies, but also her hesitation let him get hurt, which made her relive the trauma years before with her sister. Subaru's impact on Rem is so strong that for the first time we see her reacting poorly to one of Ram's decisions. When Ram wanted to leave Subaru behind as a decoy and escape, Ram wanted to stay and help. At the end of the book, Rem and Subaru have a very heartfelt conversation, with Rem straight up admitting that she feels like an inadequate substitute for her sister, and Subaru cheers her up. After all, Rem was the one who saved them, and Subaru doesn't know this awesome version of Ram that she hinges her entire existence on. Either way, Rem has worth as an individual regardless of anything else that happened in the past, and Subaru tries his best to make her realize that. The emotional conversation with all the tears and laughter starts the beginning of a strong bond between Rem and Subaru. For Rem though, it is much more than friendship. As Ram says in the final pages, Rem has fallen in love with Subaru, and I quote, "Barusu has grazed all of Rem's weak points." After stealing Rem's heart, Subaru goes on to set up a date with Emilia at the end of the book, so our protagonist has become quite a playboy. Volume 3 is very much the Rem show, but there are also interesting and funny interactions with Beatrice. Subaru obviously does not forget that in the previous loop, Beatrice went as far as making a pact with him, even if he didn't fully understand the significance of it at this point in the story, so his relationship with Beatrice becomes a lot more chummy, and I quote, "Don't say that, Bieko, we're friends, right?" Obviously she does not reciprocate, but it's a step forward nonetheless. As we've seen before, despite seeming annoyed all the time, Beatrice does care for Subaru, and she was expecting to be blamed when she told him she could not remove his curses, something which he did not do. This small interaction is interesting and reveals a little bit more about her character. One of the funniest moments in the book to me is when Subaru tasks Beatrice to prevent Emilia from going after them, and instead of persuading her like a normal person, she can't be bothered, so she physically ties Emilia down to her chair while she's sleeping using actual rope. Maybe I'm an easy person to make laugh, but I'm really glad I'm rereading the books because this moment made me laugh out loud. Now, for this section, for those of you that don't remember the dialogue like I did, I'm just going to read the top 4 most savage replies to Subaru. Number 4. Subaru says that all the girls are looking down on him, to which Ram replies, "Subaru is a masochist who likes being degraded." Number 3. Subaru says EMD, Emiliatin is majorly divine in front of Beatrice, to which she replies, "Did you say something exceedingly stupid just now, I wonder?" Number 2. Subaru tries to argue that if he dies it would make Emilia sad, which would affect Puck, which would affect Beatrice. She replies to this snowball fallacy with, "You are completely touched in the head." Number 1. Beatrice had a few good lines, but we all know who's going to win this. Right at the beginning of the book, when Subaru touches both of the twins' hands and says there's no mistaking it, the twins reply with this, "No, dear guest, you are surely mistaken about everything." No, dear guest, it was surely a mistake that you were born. Rum always wins. Overall, Volume 3 is an interesting one. It highlights Subaru's weaknesses and weak moments, but also shows a lot of his good sides. It begins and ends with emotional moments, first with Emilia and then with Rem, and the middle is very action-packed, which I also liked. Opposite all the action, there's also some exposition weaved in, for example, Subaru learning Shamak and how gates work. I appreciate that they address some of my criticisms from the previous books. They explain how Rem is very impulsive and how she can kill Subaru at any time. Even though I've managed to accept it, I still think the third death in Volume 2 could have been better handled. After getting some more context and knowledge of this world, Subaru concludes that in Volume 1, when Emilia called herself Satella, she was trying to creep him out. I still hate this plot point and I think it could have been done much better in a different way. I really like Volume 3 and my only real criticism is that we spend very little time in the village once again. I think the emotional impact of the kids being kidnapped would have been way bigger if we had spent more time with the kids. I was invested in children being kidnapped but not in the characters themselves. Besides Petra, who becomes a more relevant character later on, I can't say I recall a single name of any of the children and I just read the book a few days ago. Still, I recognize that this is a light novel. It's supposed to be a short book, and I can't say that I would cut anything to give more time to the children, so I understand that sacrifices have to be made. This is the third volume of the series, and yet the author says on the afterword that the main series starts next volume, so this we can consider the end of the prologue. Anyways, my MVP for volume 3 is Rum the Potato Master. No one masters potatoes like Rum. Obviously I'm kidding, my MVP for volume 3 is Rem. She is a complete beast in this volume. This has been my review/overview/thoughts on volume 3. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing to the channel, it helps a lot, and I'll see you on the next review for volume 4. See ya and bye bye.